If you're a CPA and you want to do any consulting, the thing you need to learn is how to listen. You need to learn how to be a great listener and get all the issues out on the table, because if you ask good questions and you listen, you'd be surprised at what clients will share with you. For us, that meant the difference of finding a major obstacle where we would realize that a deal would never get done, or working that deal all the way.
This is the Staying Power Podcast, a show that explores the challenges business owners face as they grow. I'm Brandon Hall.
And I'm Thomas Castelli.
And together we ask the tough questions to show you that running a business is not for the faint of heart. But if you have staying power, you'll overcome your challenges and achieve lasting success.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of the Staying Power Podcast. We're joined this week with Brannon Poe, CEO of Poe Group Advisors, where he and his team take a consulting-based approach to transitioning accounting firms from one owner to another through their unique process, the seamless succession. Today, we discuss the challenges that buyers and sellers face when buying or selling an accounting firm, the sales process, and of course, the challenges Brannon faces as he grows his business. Brannon, thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today. Would you be able to give our listeners a little information on your background?
Sure. I am a CPA. I started my career with Ernst & Young, and I was in the audit department. I worked in public practice for, about 5 years, and decided to leave public practice and did some other things and wound up starting to broker CPA firms in the year 2003. So that's what we do exclusively. We focus on mergers and acquisitions in the CPA industry all over North America. And we also have launched a practice management workshop called the Accounting Practice Academy, which is a virtual workshop.
Nice. So why did you end up deciding to start brokering CPA firms and start Poe Group Advisors in the first place?
Well, going back, so when I left public practice, I went to work for a family-owned company that sold plumbing, like bathtubs. I don't know if you're familiar with Ferguson Plumbing Supply House. And I really wanted to get into sales. And the founder, he had been a very, very successful salesperson in his industry. And he taught me how to go on sales calls and I was calling builders and plumbers, which are kind of a tough group to call on. It takes a lot of persistence, thick skin. I loved it. I loved sales work. And we also started a cultured marble manufacturing business because it was sort of, we had the same customer base. It was an easy bolt-on kind of business to what we were doing. And we ended up selling that business, and that was my first sort of exposure to deal making, and I really liked it. So fast forward to 2003, I had the opportunity to join Accounting Practice Sales, which is, at the time, they were a startup. So I was one of the original brokers with Accounting Practice Sales, and the founder, Howard Holmes. And it was just a perfect way to blend my prior sales experience to my CPA background.
Makes a lot of sense. So if we fast forward past your time at that company to starting your own company, did you start as where you were a one-man band, or did you end up having partners or staff with Poe Group Advisors from day one?
Well, I brought on staff. I always had, the first hire, I think, as a business owner, as a CPA firm owner, or anything else, the first hire is a good admin person. That just changes your life. So I had an admin person pretty much the whole time. That was something I did right out of the gate. And what happened, if I remember correctly, the right time frame, back, I guess it was about 2008, 2009, right as the financial crisis was hitting, the founder of APS decided to sell his company. And when he left, I decided to leave, which I guess probably happens a fair amount. And I started Poe Group Advisors at that time, and actually didn't work out the full separation until later. We were still affiliated for quite some time, but I hired my lead broker, who's still with me, back in 2009. Now I think on the team we have 14. We've got affiliates in Canada, got a market leader in Montreal. We have a market leader in Toronto. We have a new person that we just added in New Orleans. And, we've got several team members in Canada and also here in the US.
Nice, nice. So what markets do you serve in terms of geographic locations as well as the size of the clients you serve?
Yeah. So we have kind of an interesting geography. We're in the process of expanding, and the expansion has been a little unusual in terms of geography, but we're primarily in the Southeast. We just got our first listing in Nashville, Tennessee this year. We've got listings in Maryland, Georgia. We have several listings in New York, up in the Northeast, Connecticut, Maine, and Vermont. We're throughout Canada. So we're very established throughout Canada. And we are gradually expanding westward here in the U.S. Now, Accounting Practice Academy, we've had, since it's a virtual workshop, we've had people all over North America, participate in Academy.
Nice, nice. Kind of just shifting gears just a tad, with your experience brokering, accounting firms, what type of challenges do accounting firm owners or partners, have when they're selling their firm?
Well, there are a lot of challenges. I mean, the biggest challenge most owners have is timing. When is the right time to sell your business? And that's such a personal decision. And you think about it, you put yourself in the shoes of someone who's retiring. They've built this business. The business has been their day-to-day life for some time. And once that's over, it's a whole nother stage of life, right? It's those retirement years often. And some people are excited about that, which is good, which is what you hope for if when you're facing that one day. But some people are kind of scared about it. It's a new chapter that they're a little bit afraid to enter into.
That makes a ton of sense. So how do you and your team members at Poe Group Advisors ultimately help, if you help them at all, get over these challenges and into their next stage of their life?
Well, we don't try to rush anybody. We realize, first of all, that it's a very important part of the decision. And often we develop a relationship with people who are selling years before they're ready to actually exit. So we help them get ready for the sale. We help them think through, some of the, just how long it's going to take to sell, what they can do to get their practice ready for a sale. And, we encourage them to think about what it is they want to do after they exit. So I found that if someone's got a clear vision of what they want to do in retirement, or a clear vision of, where else they're going career-wise, that makes a big difference.
And if they don't have that clear vision, what typically ends up happening?
Well, I've seen a lot of different things happen. Sometimes they put it on the market anyway because they figure they'll figure it out. Either their spouse is like really on them to sell or whatever. So sometimes they do figure it out, because often they work, a lot of CPAs, especially the older generation, they work really, in my opinion, too much. So they don't have time to explore other parts of their life. They've been so business oriented, they haven't developed other hobbies or interests. So sometimes they just have to sell to figure out what they want to do. Other times they get cold feet and they don't sell. And that is frustrating. It's really frustrating for a buyer. I mean, you think about if a buyer is, committed to doing a deal and they've really kind of got their heart into it and they're ready for it, and then the seller backs out. That's really unfortunate.
Yeah, that kind of brings to another good question. So, as the buyer side, taking the buyer's perspective on it, what are the biggest challenges that buyers face, when they're going to look to acquire a firm?
I think finding the right fit. Sometimes buyers get maybe a little over eager, or they don't fully think through what kind of practice is going to be right for them. It's a scary thing to buy a business. And we really try to help people focus on the fit and not try to force something. So let them, I suggest buyers look at multiple practices if possible. It's not unlike looking for a job, because in a sense, you're buying a job. So if you're on the job market, you're not going to just interview one, for one position. You're going to try to look at as many as you can, and you're going to narrow down what's best for you in terms of culture and fit. And buying a business is no different.
Yeah, I mean, I got to imagine as a buyer, you have to look at a business and say, is this something I could be a part of every day?
Yeah.
And it's not always, not every firm's culture, I would imagine, is built for everybody. And like you said, I mean, it just keeps coming back in a loop in my mind now. It's like it's like looking for a job.
Yeah.
It really is in many ways. Would you be able to like take us through, like a brief walkthrough of what that buying process looks like?
Well, it can take a while. I mean, it depends on, I think, first of all, you got to decide, are you willing to move? And it sounds like a obvious question, but I've had people look at practices and then they go, yeah, it's a perfect practice, but I'm not willing to move. That's something you need to think about early on is, what geography are you willing to look at? Or if you already own a firm, you narrow the geographic footprint. That makes it actually a little bit easier if you already own a practice. But, you got to look at the big picture first. I think accountants often love detail and they dive right down in the weeds. And that's what I always tell people. Don't go there too fast. Like, think about it. You're up in the air and you're circling like a hawk looking for prey. You just want to slowly go further down into the detail.
I'm just thinking through this. It sounds like it's like almost buying any business. You have to know what you want first, what your, I guess your boundaries are,
Yep.
your wants and your don't wants. And that can help define your buying criteria. And then it helps you have a better search of what you're looking for. I mean, it's almost like anything. It's like buying a car. It's like buying,
Yep.
any major financial decision. You have to know what you're looking for first. Otherwise, you just not know, or you might fall for anything, right?
Yeah. And you'll waste a lot of your time and everybody else's time as well. So we've actually got some buying guides on our website. There's like a FAQ page for buyers, and we've got several downloadables that are just about that. Like, how to find a practice, how to evaluate a practice once you find one.
Okay, so just a few more questions along this line, then we'll get into some a little bit more about your practice. Like when buying a practice, like what do you see normally? We understand it's usually valued by a multiple of revenue. Would you be able to talk about how most accounting firms are valued and that side of it a little bit?
Yeah, we look at, they are traded on a multiple of revenue. That's pretty common. But we look at 6 factors that kind of tie into value. And one is location. So if you're going to be in a major metropolitan area, multiples tend to be higher. So the size of the practice is important too. You asked earlier about what size market we serve. So we sell practices, on the small side, a couple 100,000, and up to, 3 to 5 million is probably about the top of where we operate. And if you're, the sweet spot, I would say is probably between 400K up to $1.5 million. We have a lot of buyers in that size practice. If you get higher than that, the multiples can start to come down a little bit just because there's less competition for firms when you get over that $1.5 million mark. Now it really, location is really important. So that depends. The markets vary significantly from place to place. Profitability is an obvious one. More buyers are going to want a higher profit firm than a lower profit firm for obvious reasons. And one thing too that is becoming a bigger consideration is owner hours. It used to be 10 years ago, we'd sell a practice and buyers wouldn't even ask how many hours the seller worked. And I had a seller once that worked he claimed he worked about 3,000 hours a year, and which is insane, right? Like it's, it's kind of nuts. Nowadays, it's hard to find a buyer that's willing to tackle a practice like that, unless they've got, some other strategic ideas about it. But so owner hours, quality of fees, curb appeal, all of these things kind of come into play.
How would you flip accounting firms? Like, what is like something based on your experience where that to look for it because it's something that you can fix relatively easily in a relatively short amount of time? What are some of those main or kind of core issues that you feel like you could jump in and say, all right, I know that I can solve this little piece and then I can go sell it on the back end to somebody else?
Well, probably pricing, probably the easiest thing.
You mean like you've got a practice that's preparing tax returns for $400 and they need to increase it to $1,000.
Yep.
Yeah.
Pricing's a lot easier to fix than people think it is.
Really? Go into that for us a little bit. Pricing's scary, right? Or is it?
It's scary. It takes a lot of courage to implement price increases for sure. But if the service is good, if the relationship is good, clients, for the most part, not all clients, but for the most part, they're not price sensitive, they're service sensitive. So actually, we've got a podcast that we recorded a couple of years ago. We had a buyer, Jason Ding, who purchased a firm, and he bought a practice that was kind of what I would call a fixer-upper. He would probably agree with that terminology. Prices were under market, and he went in, he told the clients up front, hey, you've been paying this, I'm going to charge you this. And sometimes it was 2 or 3 times the fee. So it was really it wasn't an incremental price increase. It was a correction to market price on steroids, because what he did was he said, the level of service you've been getting is inadequate. So I'm going to charge you this, but here's what I'm going to do for it. And he pretty much just spelled out his value proposition. So he offered a more full service solution, and he lost very few clients.
Really? That is interesting. So people stayed, they wanted more, so they stayed. What were some of the reasons to justify a fee increase? Like if I buy a practice where the tax prep prices are $400 and I just go and blanket raise everybody to $1,000 minimum, what are some of the things that I can throw in there in that value proposition? Or what have you seen people throw into that value proposition?
Well, I mean, you could throw in some tax planning. If it's a business client, you could upsell a full package, including the bookkeeping. You can add some simple advisory. There's so much opportunity in simple advisory. It's not even funny. Like, businesses are probably hungry for it, thirsty for it. And CPAs are too busy charging $400 for tax returns.
And what do you mean by simple advisory? Can you go into that a little bit?
Well, simple advisory is going over financials with your client and just noting whatever it is you notice when you do a fast review of their financials, and discussing that with them and asking them some basic questions about their business and asking them about their goals, documenting that, and kind of creating some basic KPIs that you can revisit with your client on a regular basis.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. One of the things I think we see here at the Real Estate CPA is people come and they are like dying for advisory. They always say, I'd say almost 8 times out of 10, from at least my experience, they're saying that their CPAs provide no advisory. They just speak to them once per year for the tax return, or they send emails to them asking for questions and they never get a response. So, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, is I guess the point I'm trying to make. Advisory seems like an easy value add to a CPA practice.
Well, I think a lot of CPAs are cheap and they think their clients are cheap. Clients aren't cheap. They're willing to pay for that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and CPAs, I think, are cheap. You count numbers all the time. This is a piece of mindset that I had, actually, some of my mindset that had to shift too. I remember when I first started this firm, I was very focused on the bottom dollar number, or the bottom line number. And as we scaled, I was always focused on that and increasing it as a percentage of my revenue. And when I got to a certain point, I realized it's actually not about that. It's about long-term. I'm too short-term focused if I'm just thinking about my profit today. What I need to be thinking about is what's going to allow me to build a really kick-ass, pardon my French, firm over the next 10 years. And that requires investment. It requires buying human capital so that you can have capacity so that clients don't walk away mad. And that took me a long time to figure out. And I actually just sort of figured that out this year. So we've been making those investments in people and trying to front load a lot of those capacity requirements. But I mean, I was cheap too. It's a cash flow business. And so you kind of look at that and you go, well, I don't want to, I wouldn't go spend $25,000 joining somebody's mastermind group. But it's actually funny. So Tom and I are reading a book by Russell Brunson. It's called .com Secrets. Then we're going to read the trilogy. But one thing that we've learned with .com Secrets is it's all about framing, right? So if Brandon, if I walk up to you and I say, hey, join my mastermind group for $25,000, I'll help you save $100K in taxes and over 5 years. And you also get access to me and yada, yada, yada. You're going to be like, okay, I don't know who you are. So no. But if you ascend through my value ladder, right? So if you start at the bottom rung where I give you a free book and you go, wow, this book was really good about learning some growth strategies. And then you take a little training that I have, also relatively inexpensive, where I teach you how to, I don't know, manage your capacity or something. And you're stepping up my value ladder. And eventually I'm going to get you to the $25,000 point. And it's not even going to be a conversation about price anymore. It's just going to be like, let's do it. But that reading that book too has actually made me realize, wow, man. So it's not necessarily about like if you think that other people are cheap, then what you should really be doing is thinking about how can I frame my services to them in a different manner? How can I get them to that point by adding value throughout the way, building trust throughout that relationship where they go, let me buy the advisory and the bookkeeping and the tax return services all at once.
Yeah. And here's why you need to do it, because this is what it's going to mean for you. It's all about creating value first and foremost. Like, I mean, you don't want to sell something to somebody where you don't think it's going to work for them. But if you really believe it's going to work and you know that you can add value, people will pay it. I mean, not everybody will pay it, but that's okay.
Right. And so if you have multiple leads coming in, you can add value across the board. I think that that's like something that we get stuck with sometimes too, because we work with a lot of landlords, and a lot of landlords get totally, I don't know what the right word is without cursing, get messed up by their CPAs, by their, not necessarily CPAs, but just any tax advisor, because real estate taxation is very, very niche. It takes a lot to get really good at the specific pieces of the code that affect landlords, real estate investors. And we see it all the time. And so our problem has been, man, we want to save all of these people. And we would do that by giving discounts and decreasing our pricing and all that stuff. But what we've realized is that's not how you save those people. You can still work with them and provide a lot of value to them, but you have to go back to that value ladder discussion. Okay, my consulting is $5,000, but not everybody's going to go for $5,000. And do I want to service people less than $5,000? If yes, cool. Then I just need to build down on that value ladder. And if I can do that effectively, maybe it's like a membership site. Maybe it's a course that's just automated. Maybe it's not a course that's automated. Maybe I'm there live answering questions. But if I'm providing value at those lower rungs, then people are going to step up into the $5,000 consulting even easier than if I were just try to sell it to all these people that are coming in anyway. So now I get to provide even more value at the consulting pricing. But anyway, it's right. It's been really interesting.
Yeah, we have our sellers, they ask us what our fee is, and it's a percentage of the sale. It's it varies a little bit depending on the size of the firm, but they go, oh, that's a lot. I'm like, well, you're looking at it the wrong way. It shouldn't be like, what is the check you're going to write to me? It's what are you going to put in your account? That's what you really need to be focused on. And so, then you have the conversations on why, you got to have your reasons why it works.
Yeah. People need to see the value in what you have to offer.
Yeah.
And, you have to be able to explain that value to people so they see it. And I think that's what this trilogy of books by Russell Brunson that Brandon's talking about allows you to do. It allows you to build up the value of your services and properly explain it to people so that when they get to the point where they're ready to pay you for it, they're like, oh, wow, this is absolutely valuable. I see the value. And I think a lot of times it's difficult, probably especially for CPAs, I would imagine, to be able to sell their clients on the actual value of their services.
Yeah. And the biggest impediment to doing that is sort of this old way of thinking about time equating to value, and time has almost no relationship to value. Time and effort are irrelevant. It's all about the result.
But I will say that, so first off, I 100% agree with you. Just for everybody out there that wants to have the discussion between value billing and hourly billing, we've been playing around with value billing and fixed pricing for a long time. And I think that our biggest mistake was not actually having that value ladder fully built out. Again, we're trying to funnel everybody right into the middle of the value ladder, and that's where our mistake was. But we have experimented with hourly billing in the past, and man, it simplifies things. So how do you kind of get over the simplification of hourly billing? And I mean, I agree. I can spend 1 hour on somebody's account and save them $20,000. So should I be paid $250 for that? Or should I be paid $5,000 for that? But based on your experience in working with different CPA firms, when they're making the switch, how do they make value billing and fixed pricing simple to administer?
Well, I don't think it's ever going to be simple to administer because you've got to think about every client situation a little differently and what your value proposition is going to be different for every client. So I don't necessarily think it needs to be simple at the onset when you're setting a price for a client. Now, how you can simplify it is it's like, okay, this is the annual fee. We'll revisit it from time to time and it's fixed, for this period of time. So in that way, it's simple for the client. They know what their fees are going to be, which they like. They like that certainty of the fee. I think the biggest hang up CPAs have in making the switch is, well, how do I know if my people are working or not? How do I know if my people are being efficient? Well, let me just tell you, if you have to look at an hourly billing report to know if your people are working or not, you're not thinking about your people right. So, if I ask you, Brandon, about your team, you would know who the stars are and you would know who the laggards are. You know that. You don't need an hourly billing report to tell you that.
Well, and the other thing too, to kind of tack onto that, and this is what we've experienced, and I made the commitment to not have my team track time, or at least for performance management purposes, from day one, because I was committed to being a virtual CPA firm, running everything remotely. And I knew that my personality, and maybe this saved me, I don't know, but my personality is I'm going to sit there and wonder day in, day out if my team is working, if they're just giving me an hourly timesheet. So I had to figure out how to hold people accountable to results, which meant you track tasks, you track project deadlines, you track revenue, you track margins, the things that actually matter. And the time, you want to load somebody up so that they spend 35 to 40 hours a week on client work every week. And you've got to figure that out. And frankly, it's a never-ending battle. We are still figuring that out. But we're less concerned about that and more concerned about, hey, is this person producing what we need them to produce on an ongoing basis? And we measure production in a way that's not tracking time. That's helped us have better conversations about project work, about clients, and about pricing too.
Yeah. I think the industry is changing pretty rapidly right now, and COVID has probably accelerated that. But, it's going to be interesting to see what the accounting industry looks like in 5 or 10 years from now. I don't think I wouldn't say anybody, but I think there'll be fewer and fewer timesheets as we go forward.
Yeah, it seems like everybody's moving more to that fixed price model or a value model. But I got to agree. I think that at scale, when you're going to go on a value model specifically, there's going to be that thinking up front that you need to do for each individual client. It's very hard to automate that or standardize that process because every client is different. Every client's needs is different. So if you're going to be doing value pricing, it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all approach. And that's the point, right?
Yeah. Well, I heard of this software platform where, and I think it was out of the UK. I can't remember what it was, but basically it had the standard pricing schedule for tax returns. And so, for every 1040, you should charge this. And, for a Schedule C, you should charge this. This is all this, schedule. And I think, man, what a waste that would be. That would be horrible because it just doesn't tie into, there's so many different factors that you should consider with every client.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if we shift gears just a little bit and focus more or less on the business you run, what are some of the challenges you faced, growing and maintaining your company, Poe Group Advisors?
Well, the most challenging thing that hit me kind of early on when I started doing these deals is things would just hit me from I'd be doing a deal and something would just hit me out of the blue. Like some major problem with a deal would just surface, and it would catch me off guard. And sometimes it would catch me off guard, like right before the closing happened, and the deal would just collapse. And that was like one of the most painful experiences that I had to kind of learn the hard way. So I went and got some training on how to become a consultant. So I kind of switched gears from being a salesperson to being more of a consultant. And that made all of the difference in the world, because all of those, as a consultant, you get those issues out on the table early because you're asking really good questions. You're listening very carefully. If you're a CPA and you want to do any consulting, we tell people, like, the thing you need to learn is how to listen. You need to learn how to be a great listener and get all the issues out on the table, because if you ask good questions and you listen, you'd be surprised at what clients will share with you. And for us, that meant the difference of finding a major obstacle where we would realize that a deal would never get done, or working that deal all the way to the 11th hour. So once I learned that, if a deal's not supposed to happen, or if it's not going to happen, you want to find that out soon, like right away. Like, what could go wrong here? What could possibly go wrong here? And so that's kind of built into our process now. So it avoids a lot of pain and a lot of frustration.
Absolutely. It sounds like what you did is you found out the questions that allow you to qualify your buyer early on in the process, or disqualify your buyer maybe perhaps early on in the process, so that you're not getting down. You're not spending all this time and effort, energy of yourself and your team pouring into this deal that may never close. And it was maybe clear from the beginning that it wasn't going to close in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the experience I had was like something would just hit me, from out of nowhere. And, it was an issue that could have been discovered earlier in many cases.
When you first work with a client, I took a quick look at your website. I didn't go into too far in depth, but it looks like you have kind of like an application, I believe it is, to work with you. Is that how your system works?
Well, for the Academy, for Accounting Practice Academy, which is our practice management workshop, you have to apply. Yes. The reason you have to apply is because we group members together and we have breakout groups. So we want to be selective because, if you're going to join something like that, you want to feel like you're in a mastermind with people that you want to be in a mastermind with.
Makes a lot of sense. So it kind of weeds people out, puts them in different boxes or different buckets from their initial application. It makes a lot of sense. Was there any particular challenge you ever faced? And we ask everybody who comes on the show this question. Any particular challenge you faced that was so bad, so horrible, that you're like, you know what? I'm done with the brokerage business. I'm just going to go back and, get a W-2 job being a salesperson and just take the easier path, if you will.
Well, I never thought about going back to work for somebody because I've determined that I'm pretty much unemployable at this point in my career. I'm way too disagreeable to work for somebody else. So, 2008, 2009, coming through the financial crisis, that was probably the toughest. Mergers and acquisitions across the board took a big nosedive during that time. Our business between 2008 and 2010 was almost cut in half. So it was a really painful period. The worst thing, because, I don't know if you guys remember, but the banks were collapsing. And so our biggest bank that was doing our SBA loans at the time was CIT. And my banker called me and he said, I had 3 deals that were approved. I had already had commitment letters on them. And he said, you better make sure all your T's are crossed and every I is dotted on these deals, because they are looking for reasons to kill these deals. They're running out of cash. And we ended up closing 2 out of 3 of those. But that was a scary time. But we made it. So, when COVID hit, some of those memories of 2008 kind of came into my mind. And I wasn't nearly as scared. Once you go through one of those, the fear, you kind of realize that you'll adapt and figure it out.
I got to imagine that having where a lot of mergers and acquisitions focus on getting a loan, right? And that capital isn't available from the banks. That definitely slows down that business. And, I think I did a lot of looking into mergers and acquisitions not too long ago. And what I found was that in COVID-19, the way it is right now, the SBA specifically, is giving out money left and right now. So, perhaps unlike the last financial crisis, this is maybe one of the better times to look into getting a business rather than,
I think so. I mean, I think the Fed's taken unprecedented moves in this one, and you shouldn't bet against the Fed, right? That's the common advice. And I think that's true here because I see some inflation coming in the future. I don't see how it won't. Interest rates are really, really rock bottom. They're going to be rock bottom for a while. You couple that with possible tax law changes. I think it's a great time to buy.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So if you would have to look back on your career, is there anything that you would have done differently if you had to do it all over again?
That's a tough question. I'm really happy with how I conducted my business and career. I had mentors early on, really good mentors. I was lucky enough to start a business in my 20s. So I was a partner in a business at the age of 23, 24. And when you're that young and you're a business owner and you're partners with other people, I partnered with some older, more seasoned business guys, and they taught me a lot. And one of the things they taught me was it's not all about the business. You've got to balance it all out, and you got to have fun. You got to travel. You got to spend time with your family. And I've done that. Like I went to my kids' soccer games. I went to, dance recitals. I took vacation unplugged all along with my kids. And I built a nice business. So I really don't have any regrets.
That's always good to hear, right? No regrets, live life, no regrets.
Especially since you said that you're unemployable now. So that's really good to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so why don't we ask this in a different way? Would you do anything differently if you were to start all over again?
I would listen to that voice of frustration, that voice of doubt. I would listen to it more carefully, because when that voice kind of starts to get a little louder, you need to listen to it and make those changes faster.
You got to trust your gut, as they say. A lot of people, your intuition, you've got that little voice that speaks in your head, that little tingle inside your gut. Most people say if you follow that, you'll most of the time be right. Like, 85, 90% of the time, you won't always be right, but usually that will steer you in the right direction.
Yeah.
We're coming up on time here. If our listeners wanted to learn more about you or Poe Group Advisors and what you do, what would be the best way for them to do so?
Best way is to go to our website, PoeGroupAdvisors.com. There's a ton of content there. We actually have a podcast as well on our resources tab. We've got a lot of downloadables. It's pretty much everything's on our website. And you can link in with me. I'm at Brannon Poe, P-O-E.
All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and drop that information into the show notes for everybody who's listening. If you want to learn, if you're looking to sell your practice, buy a practice, learn more about it, you can head over to the website. And Brandon, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today. It was very informative, and at least I learned a lot.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. It was fun.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, leave us a review on iTunes and share the show with other business owners who may be facing their own growth challenges. And if you own a professional services firm, consider joining our private community. The Staying Power Collective is a community where owners of accounting, law, and consulting firms discuss best practices for running and growing virtual businesses. You'll get access to our Slack group, and you'll have a Zoom meeting once a month with a small group of other firm owners. To apply for the group, head on over to www.stayingpowercollective.com and fill out the brief form. And if you have suggestions for future topics or guests, or if you have general questions or feedback, send us an email at contact@stayingpowercollective.com. Thanks so much for listening, and have a great rest of your week.